Is an Xtool M1 laser cutter better than a Cricut machine? Let's find out. Hello and welcome to Craft with Sarah. In this video, I'm comparing the cutting functionality of my Xtool M1 laser cutter to that of a Cricut Maker to see which one turns out best. The Xtool M1 is primarily a laser cutter, but unlike most other laser cutters, it also comes with a blade inside, just like a Cricut machine blade, to allow you to cut cardstock, vinyl, and other materials on a cutting mat. I thought it would be a fun idea to put the Xtool through its paces by comparing it to a Cricut. Keep watching to the end to find out which machine is crowned the winner. Let's get started. We'll start by cutting on the Xtool, and if you've used a Cricut before, this mat will look very familiar. There's one difference though, which is with the Xtool cutting mats, they're also sticky on the back of the mat to hold them in place when they're inside your laser cutter. I've put my mat in so it's nicely stuck in there, it lines up perfectly, and if we go over to the left under where the blade is, this gold thing here, this is the knife blade that's going to cut out the cardstock. I've put my card in and I'm just going to brayer it down. It would have been easier to do this before I put the mat in the laser, but I wasn't really thinking things through, but it still works fine doing it this way. Here's how my screen looks in the Xtool software, and I'm just going to cut these 4 simple little birthday images, but make them a bit bigger to 5 inches wide. I'm going to be cutting the exact same thing on my Cricut later from the same type of card. And I've changed it to cut over here, but I'm not sure how to choose cardstock. And it did take me a little while to figure out that what you actually need to do is change it at the top where it says laser flat, change it to the blade cutting instead. One thing that confused me a bit is that once I've changed that, I now can't actually see my whole cutting mat, which is a bit odd. Perhaps that means you can't use the full size of the mat, I don't know. But because my design fits on this, I'm going to go with it. I'm looking for cardstock in here, but can't really see anything suitable. And unfortunately, I think I'm having an internet glitch, which is why it's not showing all of the other settings. So there probably is cardstock settings if you go into more, but I'm going to use brown craft paper. That's the closest thing I can see. Maybe I'll use a define the material, but as I've never ever done the blade cutting on my Xtool M1 before, maybe I should just go with something a bit pre-made. I will actually up the pressure. That seems really low for cardstock. So let's change that up a bit. Put it back to brown craft paper. There we go. 234. Yeah, that's good. We'll go with that one. Maybe a little higher. I'm using thick cardstock, so I don't want to risk it not cutting through. It seems to think it can do it at full speed, so we'll go ahead, give this a try. And now I'm framing it. Framing is what tells the Xtool where your machine and the material are, so it knows exactly where it needs to cut. I'm going to time this too, and when I cut the same thing on my Cricut, I will also time that one, so we can see which one is the quickest. And also which one is the best, which, you know, if it's slower and cuts better, then that is okay with me. I'm not going to change any of these settings, just go ahead and click start and do my first ever cardstock cut on the Xtool M1. I haven't taken this out of the machine yet, but I'm a little disappointed with some of those cut lines. It's a bit blurry, but they are kind of jaggedy. It's not a smooth cut at all. Here's a close-up of how it's cut out, and you can see there's a lot of kind of not quite tearing, but definitely rough edges on these pieces, which is a little disappointing because they're quite easy cuts, and it did tear where it didn't quite cut all the way through on the middle of that balloon. So I'm wondering if this is just because I don't have the right settings. I know when I started with my Cricut, I also had cut problems until I learned the machine. You do have to just spend some time. There will be some wastage at the beginning of any type of electronic craft machine as you start to learn what does and doesn't work. So I'm not 100% happy right now, but I'm going to go back into the software, have a play, change some settings, and give it another go. In total, this took 1 minute 21 seconds to cut out. I've put a new bit of cardstock on my mat. It's exactly the same type of card, so I'm going to keep that consistent. This time I'll put the pressure up a bit higher. Let's go to 350, and I'll slow it down a bit. It did cut very quickly at 1 minute 21 seconds, so I'm wondering if I make it slower, will it cut better? Let's have another go and see how it works with this slightly tweaked settings. This time, the cut took 1 minute 28 seconds, so it was only 7 seconds slower. And it has cut slightly better on those lines, but it's still not perfect. And my card is not particularly fibrous, so I'm not sure why it's doing this. Here's a closer look at my second attempt at cutting. Those edges definitely are a little bit improved, but not quite there yet. So let's give it one more tweak in the software, try it again and see if I can get it that little bit better. It also did still tear on the bottom of this piece where it didn't quite cut through. Let's try for third time lucky. This time I'm going to set the cut setting all the way up to the top, and I'm also changing it to a user-defined setting to see if that makes a difference. So right up to 360 and take the speed down even more, and we'll see if this makes a slightly better cut. Uh-oh, we've got a bit of a fail. Even though I upped the pressure, this time it hasn't cut through the cardstock at all, and we have some major ripping going on. I wonder why. Even though it was much slower this time at 1 minute 51 seconds, so almost half a minute slower than my original, it hasn't cut all the way through, and it has on some bits but not others. The bits it has cut through are perfect lines, so it looks like it was trying to do a really good cut. Maybe my blade is dirty, so I'm going to try that and just have a little look at it, see if there's any debris stuck which might be causing it to tear. A dirty blade was the cause of the problem. It had a little bit of pink stuck on it, but I've cleaned that off and now it's ready for my next experiment of cutting a detailed image. But first, let's move over to the Cricut and see how that does on those birthday images. To try and keep this a fair experiment, I'm using the same type of pink cardstock, and I'm also using a brand new light grip Cricut mat because my Xtool mat was new too, and I'm doing the same birthday icon designs. Here it is cut out with my Cricut, and those lines are perfect. So I'm already thinking the Cricut might have the edge over the Xtool M1 when it comes to cutting out cardstock. I've peeled the excess of the cardstock off, and you can see it's still looking pretty good, but has it cut through? The next little step will tell us what we need to know. As I was expecting, the Cricut has cut these absolutely perfectly. There's no little dings in the side, the card is nice and smooth, the cuts look great, and overall this has done a much better job. Although it was a little slower than the Xtool at 1 minute 32 seconds, but I'd rather wait those extra 10 seconds and have something that's actually cut really, really well, rather than it be a bit quicker and end up with something that doesn't look as good. I'm now going to up-level this experiment and try something a bit more complex. As the last time I ran this through with the birthday icons on the Xtool, I had a bit of debris on the blade. I'm actually not going to really count that one because it wasn't a fair trial because of that debris. So I'm just going to use the same kind of settings to do this lion. I'll delete those birthday ones, and this time I'll cut this much more detailed, and I'll change it to 6 inches wide. This time I'm using an even thicker bit of cardstock to see if it can cut through, because I've put this at the highest cut pressure, so in theory this should be able to cut through even the thickest kind of card. So let's see if it can. I've refreshed my camera, so now you can see the brown card I'll be using. Here's my lion, it's set to full pressure and the speed is at 65. Let's see how quickly it cuts out the lion. It's taking its time, but it's very, very nearly finished with the cut. It should be done any second now. I'm surprised it took this long, but I did take that speed setting down, so I can't really complain when it's me it's reduced it. You can see here it took 9 minutes and 17 seconds in total, but how did it actually cut? It looks like it's done a fairly good job. The lines are much smoother than it was on the birthday pictures. There's a couple of little bits on those narrow little points, but overall, this is looking like a much better cut, even though it's much more intricate, and the cardstock's thicker. So we'll take it off the mat and see how it's actually done. Unfortunately, when I took the card off the mat, I could see that it hasn't actually cut all the way through. This is the back of the card, and you can see that it just hasn't gone all the way through the card. I tried poking out some of the pieces anyway, even though it hadn't quite cut, which worked a little bit, but it's just messy. And I'm really disappointed because I thought this had cut perfectly when I first opened up the machine, but it hasn't gone through. And this was on its highest cut settings. So it hasn't done very well. Can the Cricut do better? Here's my Cricut cutting from that same type of brown card. It's the same lion set to the same size. It definitely felt as this was going that it was cutting quicker than the Xtool M1. And when it finished, I did time it, and this took 6 minutes 50 seconds compared to the Xtool's 9 minutes 17 seconds. So around 3 minutes quicker on the Cricut. I haven't ejected my mat yet, but this looks kind of similar to how it did when it came out the Xtool, so maybe my Cricut hasn't cut through this cardstock either. It is pretty thick. But it does look like it has cut through because the excess cardstock peeled off my mat perfectly, so I'm hopeful that this is going to come off and be all the way cut through too. And here it is, my Cricut version of the lion. Spot on, perfect. So I would say in this experiment, the Cricut has absolutely won. This was cut on the heavy cardstock setting, and it's just done it beautifully. I can't fault it at all. I'm comparing them both here. You've got the Xtool on the left and the Cricut on the right. And this was my first time cutting with the Xtool M1, but I've been cutting cardstock with my Cricut for years, so obviously I know the Cricut inside and out, and that may have played a part into why I was able to cut wonderfully on the Cricut and not so well on the Xtool M1. I'm definitely going to try this again at some point and see if I can improve the cut settings. But for now, my recommendation if you want a machine to cut cardstock is definitely going to have to be the Cricut Maker. But the Xtool is wonderful for other things like doing the engraving and laser cutting and everything that really I think is what it shines at. I hope you enjoyed this video comparing the cutting functionality of an Xtool M1 laser cutter to that of a Cricut Maker machine. If you did, please give the video a thumbs up, and also I'd love to know your experiences at using both of these machines in the comments below. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel for loads more Cricut, M1 and general crafting tutorials. Thank you for watching, bye!